Okay, picture this. February 1994, Riverside, California. A woman is rushed into an ER. Seems like a standard procedure, right? But then within minutes, the people treating her, the doctors, the nurses, they start collapsing. What comes next isn't a diagnosis. It's just a storm of questions with no easy answers.
So, in this explainer, we're not just going to look at spooky stories. We're going to do something a little different. We're going to perform, well, an anatomy of unease. We're going to dissect what happens and the stories we tell when things just stop making sense.
All right, so here's our mission, and it's simple, but it's not easy. Our job isn't to believe or to debunk anything. It's to investigate. We're going to look at these inexplicable events and the stories that grow around them with the kind of cold precision you'd expect from a forensic analyst. The whole point is to try and separate the real signal from all the noise.
You know, we tend to think that if you just have enough evidence, medical charts, witness statements, audio tapes, the truth will eventually just pop out. But what happens when all that documentation, all that proof, doesn't actually make things clearer? What if it just makes the mystery even deeper?
This brings us to the case of Gloria Ramirez, who the media called the toxic lady. So back in February 1994, she shows up at a hospital in California with some really bizarre symptoms. But the weirdest part? The medical staff who were treating her started fainting, collapsing. The first official theory was basically mass hysteria, a psychological event. But the physical symptoms were very real. Then a second theory came out, this one pointing to a wild chemical reaction involving a solvent called DMSO. And this is where our problem really starts. You have two plausible theories, both based on evidence, but they completely contradict each other. And the one piece of information that could settle it, her family saying she never ever used DMSO, directly refutes the chemical theory. So the evidence doesn't solve anything. It just locks the entire case in this state of permanent contradiction.
Okay, let's switch gears to what might be one of the most documented paranormal cases ever, the Enfield poltergeist. On one side, you have this mountain of evidence. I mean, hundreds of hours of audio recordings. Acoustic analysis showed that the rapping sounds in the house were, well, weird, different from sounds people could make on purpose. You've got multiple witnesses, even skeptics, who swear they saw furniture move on its own. But then there's the other side, the human element. The kids at the center of it all. They were caught faking things, red-handed. Even the lead investigator admitted, yep, some of it was staged. So what are we looking at here? A real phenomenon that got messy with some hoaxes? Or just a hoax that happens to have some data points that nobody can quite explain? And that's really the core tension of this whole thing. You look at something like this, all these tapes, all this documentation, it just feels so official. It feels like the answer has to be in there somewhere, right? We should be able to figure this out. But the evidence itself pulls you into totally opposite directions. It's not giving us a solution. The evidence is the problem. Yeah, this quote from researcher Michael Nam really nails it. He says that witness testimonies, whether they're from believers or skeptics, have to be treated with caution because they don't always line up with the facts. And that's the takeaway, really. When things get strange, even our own eyes and ears can become unreliable. Belief or disbelief can color what we perceive. So even with all the recordings and all the witnesses you can want, the data itself can be broken from the start. So let's shift our focus a bit. What happens when you take away all the physical evidence? No medical charts, no audio tapes. What if the only thing you have to go on is the story itself? In cases like that, the narrative is the evidence. And we have to take it apart, piece by piece, to really understand why it's so powerful. Let's break down a classic urban legend. I'm sure you've probably heard some version of this. It all starts in a totally normal place, a college apartment. Then you get a small, relatable mistake. One of the roommates, Lucy, forgets her keys and has to come back late. This leads her to make a very considerate choice. She hears her roommate breathing, so she decides not to turn on the lights, right? She doesn't want to wake her up. The scary part doesn't happen right away. It waits. It's only when she gets back later that she finds, well, the gruesome scene and a terrifying message left behind. So, the real question here isn't, did this actually happen? From our analytical point of view, the question is, why does this story work so well? What is it about this specific sequence of events that is so effective at creating that feeling of dread? It's because the story is basically a perfect piece of psychological engineering. It takes a mundane, everyday setting and makes you feel unsafe there. The threat is in the room with her the whole time, just hidden by the darkness. And this is the crucial part. Her fate is sealed not because she did something stupid, but because she did something logical and considerate. The final twist, that message, "Aren't you glad you didn't turn on the lights?" doesn't just point to the killer. It turns her own thoughtful act into the very source of her terror. It implicates her. Or think about the punchline from another classic story. A young woman is home alone, scared, but her dog is under the bed, and every so often she feels a reassuring lick on her hand. The next morning, she finds her dog dead in the bathroom, and on the wall, a message written in blood: "Humans can lick too." So let's break down the mechanism there. Why is that so effective? It's surgically precise. It takes something that is a universal symbol of comfort and safety, right, a dog's affection, and it flips it completely. It turns that very symbol of comfort into the source of the terror. The story weaponizes safety itself. There's no safe space left. So, after all this, where does that leave us? We've gone from cases with messy, contradictory evidence to stories that are perfectly built for fear with no evidence at all. We're kind of stuck, right? In that gray area between what we can actually prove and what we feel.
We've seen that evidence can be completely contradictory. With Gloria Ramirez, the medical reports, the data, it all just created two versions of reality that can't both be true. The evidence is the mystery.
We've also seen that witnesses can be unreliable. In the Enfield case, you have tapes, you have eyewitnesses, but it's all contaminated by admitted fakery and just the simple fact that our own senses can fail us. The documentation basically proves that it can't be trusted. And finally, we've seen that the most powerful stories, they don't need any proof at all. Urban legends show us that you can create a lasting sense of unease with absolutely zero basis in fact. Their power isn't in evidence. It's in their perfect, terrifying design. And that brings us to the final and most important question. When all of our tools, the charts, the recordings, the witness statements, when they all fail, what's left? When the facts just run out, something else has to fill that empty space. And whatever that something is, that is the true anatomy of unease.